Welcome back to the Eureka Math series on understanding the major work of the 3-5 grade band. My name is Chelsea Harned and I am hosting this series to add a layer of clarity around key learnings that we want for students within Eureka Math. Our hope is that by engaging in this series, you are going to leave with better strategies and connections around implementing our curriculum in your classroom. As a reminder, here are the objectives for the learning in this entire series. This specific learning experience that we're going to engage in together today is going to focus more on that second objective around the sequence of and practice of multiplication. For our learning experiences today, you want to make sure that you have your place value discs next to you as well as your guided notes. Just like we have throughout our entire series, you want to make sure that you are following along and documenting strategies in your guided notes so that you have them for later planning opportunities and implementation of the Eureka curriculum. So we've been learning about the progression of practice within this learning series, and this learning experience is no different. We really want our students to have that deep conceptual understanding, especially with a very important skill like multiplication. And we're going to start today with a concrete representation. That's why you need those place value discs. And we're going to move along this progression of practice. So you're going to engage in a pictorial and abstract understanding as well. This is really going to serve you in your implementation to understand how those different progressions are connected for multiplication so that you can support students if there are misconceptions or misunderstandings in your lessons. Just like we have in our other learning experiences together, we are going to start with that first progression of practice step with the concrete model. This is how we develop that deep conceptual understanding in our students. As they move along the progression of practice, we want them to have this really concrete representation to always come back to ground their understanding. Now, if you have students who are new to Eureka, this may be very important because this may be the first concrete model that they've seen of the multiplication process. They may have seen the abstract representation, but to really get that deep conceptual understanding, this is going to be a learning experience you want to make sure your students engage in. So pull out those place value discs, get your guided notes handy with a writing utensil. I'm going to jump out of the presentation and do some modeling. Be sure to follow along as we go. So I'm going to walk you through the steps of using the place value chart and place value discs to show how conceptually you can show multiplication. For this example, we're going to do 3 times 23, and we're going to name that as the product of 3 groups of 23. And remember, 23 in unit form is 2 tens, 3 ones. So you're going to hear me using 3 groups of 23 or 3 groups of 2 tens, 3 ones interchangeably to reiterate the conceptual understanding with the work that we are doing here. You have your own place value discs and your own place value chart in front of you. You can follow along with me as I solve the problem 3 times 23. So 3 times 23 is really 3 groups of 2 tens, 3 ones. And I'm going to set it up on my place value chart so that you can really see conceptually the 3 groups of 2 tens, 3 ones, or 3 groups of 23. So here I'm going to set them up. Here are my 2 tens. Here are my 3 ones. So I have my one group of 2 tens, 3 ones. Now I'm going to set up my other group. Here's my second group of 2 tens and 3 ones. And now my third group of 2 10s and 3 1s. So you can see each row shows my 3 groups of 23. This is 1 group, this is 2 groups, and this is 3 groups. So I have 3 groups of 23, or 3 groups of 2 10s, 3 1s. So now we're going to find the total value in each of our place value groups in order to help us find the total of 3 groups of 23. So we're going to start in the ones place. So here in the ones place, I have 3 groups of 3 1s. And I'm going to write that here on my place value chart. I'm going to show I have 3 groups of 3 1s. And that equals 9 1s. Now I'm going to move from my ones place to my tens place. And again, I have 3 groups of, and in each group I have 2 10s, and that equals 6 10s. And if I were to add 6 10s plus 9 1s, I get 69. Now that we have seen the concrete representation, let's take a minute to look at the abstract representation that's on your screen. What connections do you notice? If you noticed that this partial product method isolates the ones and the tens place, just like we did with our chips, you're correct. As students progress in their understanding, you can make notations like this abstract representation next to your place value chart once kids have worked through the concrete representation. Remember, the movement from concrete to pictorial to abstract is fluid, so you can and should go back and forth to really increase that deep conceptual understanding. Now we're going to move to our second stage in that progression of practice and look at a pictorial model of multiplication. This strategy is going to feel very similar, except this problem is going to involve regrouping. This is number 2 on your guided notes, and there is a small place value chart for you to follow along with me. You won't need your place value discs anymore because we are going straight to pictorial in this model. I'm going to jump out of the presentation again and model the strategy for you. Get your writing utensil handy. Let's get to work. I'm now going to model a 1-digit by 2-digit multiplication problem that does involve regrouping. And we are going to find the product of 4 groups of 34. And we're going to use a pictorial model to help us solve this problem. Our pictures are going to represent the same chips that we just used in our concrete model. So what I'm going to draw is going to represent chips. It's just going to be a pictorial model of those chips. And again, you're going to hear me reference the unit form of 34, 3 10s, 4 1s, as I go through interchangeably with 34. Again, this really helps reinforce the understanding of the place value involved as we multiply. So again, we're going to have 4 groups of 34, 4 equal groups of 34, and we're going to draw discs on our place value chart. And again, we're going to see 4 groups of 3 10s, 4 1s. And I'm going to do the same thing where I start by drawing my first group. So I have my first group of 3 10s, 4 1s. So this is my first group of 3 10s, 4 ones. My first group of 34, and I'm going to have 4 equal groups. So here's my second group of 3 tens, 4 ones, my third group of 3 tens, 4 ones, and my fourth group of 3 tens, 4 ones. So right now you can see I have my 4 groups of 3 tens, 4 ones, and each of my rows, just like I did with my chips, represents one of those groups. So I have 4 groups of 34 here shown. Again, we're going to start in the ones place, and we're going to find the total value in each of the place values. So as I go through, I have 4 groups of 4 ones, which gives me 16 ones. So because I have more than 10 ones, that means I'm going to have to regroup. And I want to bundle my 10 ones that I'm going to regroup. So I'm going to bundle these 2 right here and the 8 that are in these 2 rows, because I know 8 and 2 are 10. And I'm going to regroup that over here. And I'm going to show this grouping, and I'm going to put one more 10 here in the tens place to show that regrouping. So now that I've counted my total value in my ones place, I'm going to move over to my tens place, and I'm going to find the total value of tens that I have. So again, I have 4 groups of 3 tens, and that is 12 tens. And I'm not counting this one that we regrouped right here because we're just finding this total right here. When we find the total value of everything all together, that's when I'll bring together all of my bundles and I'll count. So again, I have more than 10 tens, so I need to regroup again. I need to bundle again. So again, I'm going to count 10 tens, and I'm going to bundle those. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to bundle those together. And again, I'm going to draw my arrow over here. So now I have 100, and I'm going to draw my 100 right here. So now that I want to find the total, I'm going to go by place value, and I am going to count how many I have in each place value. So right here, I have 100. So I bundled right here. So left, I have 1, 2, 3. So I have 3 tens. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ones. And I'm going to write that as an addition sentence underneath my chart. So I have 100 plus 3 tens plus 6 ones. And that equals 136.
So now that you've seen the concrete and the pictorial representation of this multiplication strategy, what connection are you seeing between those two representations? Now I want you to think about how this progression is really going to help students understand the abstract representation. Let's take a moment and look at the abstract representation for the problem that we just saw in the model I just did. So again, we used a partial product method here to solve in this abstract representation. What connections do you notice now between the abstract and the pictorial representation?
Hopefully, you've noticed the connection of how the partial products really helps make sense of the groupings that we saw in the place value chart. I'm also hoping that you notice that students really begin to understand what regrouping actually is. It's not just about a memorization of steps and remembering to carry the elusive 1. No, students are really beginning to understand that regrouping is that bundling and regrouping over to another place value so that we can actually solve the multiplication and the product of those equal groups. And by seeing it in a concrete or pictorial representation, by the time they get to the abstract, it really starts to make sense. So we have come to the end of our learning experience in this part of our series, but I really want you to think about that as you have gone through this learning experience, what do you want to make sure that you are bringing back to your classroom for your students? What are the parts of the progression that you really need to make sure that you are implementing with fidelity so that students really and deeply and conceptually understand multiplication? Thank you for joining me in this learning experience in our series of understanding the major work of the 3-5 grade band in Eureka Math. See you next time.